Okay, well, I might as well get started. I promised you that this would only be an hour because I think that's all anyone's attention span actually is, so I'll try to keep it to an hour. However, I will stay back. If anyone has questions about their own personal family cabin, I'll stick around and you can ask me questions about that. I'll be happy to answer it. So, if you're here tonight, it's either because you're an owner of a family cabin, you might be the son or daughter of someone who owns a family cabin, or you're a lawyer or a financial advisor who wants to counsel their clients a little bit better about the solution. So let's get started here. Now some stragglers will come in, but I'm only going to talk about myself for a little bit, so that's okay, that's not that important. My name is Joel Mullen, and obviously I'm an attorney, and I practice in trust and estates. I don't practice in any other area, no divorces or personal injury or anything like that. It's all trust and estates work. And I've got down here law as a vocation, and I want to talk just about that for just a minute, because my first day of law school, my constitutional law professor, a guy named Howard Vogel, really smart guy, he said to me, and well, he said to the whole class actually, he said, if you don't treat the practice of law as a vocation or a calling, he said, you might as well just quit now and save your money, because if you don't, you're going to hate your job, and you're not going to do well at it, and you'll probably end up quitting anyway. And I never knew what he meant by that. I didn't know what he meant by that all through law school. I didn't know what he meant by that even my first few years practicing law. But now I get it a little bit, and we're going to see a little bit about that today. And what I mean is, law as a vocation, is let's talk about a criminal defense attorney. Now, a criminal defense attorney's got a really tough job. Dealing with criminals, some good people, some not so good people, and it's a really, really tough job. But the vocation part for them might be, if they're handling a lot of DWIs or something like that, they might see it as not just getting them off or helping to reduce their sentence, but maybe helping people find that there's solutions to maybe addiction. And so that's the vocation part. They're taking it a step further. That makes it meaningful to them. Or a divorce attorney who's dealing with families who are going through crisis. Well, that's also a really crummy job. It's tough to do. But where they might find their vocation is in making the best of a really bad situation, and making sure that those parents get along well enough so that they don't damage the kids. Well, in estate planning, there's also a part of it that's vocational for us, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that tonight. So, well, my goals for this hour are, number one, to prove that an estate plan involving a family cabin is a problem, and it's a problem that must be solved. Because without it, the problems will arise and they'll be devastating to the family. And this isn't just a cabin problem. I mean, we all know that family that has fought over the kitchen soup spoons and everything like that. Families, after a loved one passes away, happen to get themselves in a situation where emotions pop up to the surface and they have a hard time dealing with it and they fight. Well, we can solve that through estate planning. But it's even a bigger problem with the family cabin, as you'll see. And also to highlight, not just the problem, but what we're really here to talk about is solving the problem with this really underutilized tool called a cabin trust. And finally, I want to prove to everyone that no asset is worth the kids fighting over. And we're going to talk about that when we talk about the solutions part, because this is a problem, and it does need to be solved, but it doesn't need to be solved with a cabin trust. All right, so what's the good news here? Well, number one, it doesn't have to be a problem for the kids. But what it does mean is we have to do some planning. And the planning will result in not only the kids having a relationship that is not destroyed, but it even strengthens their relationships. And we'll talk about that, and you'll see what I mean by that. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to frame the issue here, and what I need to do, because not everyone in this room, some people understand estate planning, some people do not. So I need to take a moment to explain what I mean by doing estate planning, okay? And whether your family's worth $5,000 or $50 million, the problem is always the same. The goals are always the same. This is not a rich person's problem. And we're trying to do only 4 things, okay? 4 things. Any estate plan, 5,000, 50 million, the same. Number 1, we're trying to avoid probate. Probate is that legal proceeding in which your assets are passed to whomever your heirs are, and it doesn't have to go through probate. Now, I could talk to you about why sometimes probate is necessary and sometimes why we want to go through probate, but in general we want to avoid it, okay? So that's one goal. The next goal is to pass assets to the next generation, and that's really what we're talking about here today. But again, any estate planner worth his salt can do that. And next is incapacity planning. Now, this is also a really underutilized tool in estate planning. Is often we think of wills and trusts as something we have in case we die, but we also need to account for incapacity. Who's going to make financial or legal decisions for us if we can't? Who's going to make healthcare decisions for us if we cannot? Does everyone remember the Terry Schiavo situation?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah? Okay. Well, that was an estate planning problem. And Florida didn't do a very good job of figuring out who decides, to put it bluntly, whether to pull the plug or not. Is it the husband of this woman or was it her parents? Well, we've done a really good job of figuring that out now. And what we do, and through the estate planning process, is you name someone to make those decisions for you. And here's why it's important. That's a really tough decision for a family to make, to pull the plug or not, to end the life. And so therefore, if you take it away from the family and say, look, this is what I'm telling you is going to happen, then it alleviates all the guilt involved with that decision. Because if you've got a large family, what are the chances that all the kids are going to agree on that decision or not? It's nil. It's nil. Somebody's going to say that you shouldn't have done it, and others are going to say you should. So therefore, you take it out of their hands and you alleviate all that guilt. That's incapacity planning. And then finally, no estate taxes. And I'm going to take a moment to talk about this because this is a big problem. Many of you who own a family cabin have an estate tax problem and you don't even know it. Okay? Who in here remembers a guy named Joe Robbie? He started the Miami Dolphins. They even called it Joe Robbie Stadium for one. Well, have you also heard that the estate tax is the only voluntary tax that there is? Well, that's largely true, because if you plan for the estate tax, usually you can either reduce it significantly or eliminate it completely. Now, I mentioned Joe Robbie. Joe Robbie is a guy who owned the Miami Dolphins, NFL football team. And he died in 1994. When he died, all his family owned was the Miami Dolphins. And he was worth about $100 million. Well, when he died, the federal estate tax was at about 70%, and that was out of any money over $600,000. So 9 months after Joe Robbie's death, and he was a lawyer, by the way, but he never planned for it. He didn't plan on dying. And when he died, his family had 9 months to come up with $70 million to pay Uncle Sam. Well, they didn't have $70 million sitting around. It was wrapped up in a team, a new stadium, players' salaries, contracts, you name it. So they had to sell the Miami Dolphins, the family business. Well, they didn't end up selling it for $100 million. I think they sold it for around $80 million. Now, $10 million in the end is not, nobody's crying for the Robbies, but this was a family that was worth $100 million 9 months earlier, okay? Now, everyone remembers Jackie Kennedy Onassis. Well, she died in around 1997, and she was also reportedly worth about $100 million when she died. But she had a very extensive estate plan. So when she died, she paid Uncle Sam about $3 million in estate tax. So when I say that the estate tax is the only voluntary tax there is, it's not entirely true, but it's mostly true. But it takes planning.